All right, thank you, everyone. It's always great to be the panel just before lunch, so we'll try to get right into it and get you guys out to lunch on time. So I'm Ken Day, the Director of Government and Public Affairs for the JR Simplot Company in Boise, Idaho. And I may be a little biased, but this is a very important panel that obviously my company has a lot of interest in. If you notice the title, it's Field to Freight to Fork: Transportation and Agricultural Supply Chains. My company has a saying that we are a mine to fork company. We mine phosphate ore, produce it into fertilizer. We grow potatoes, process them. So but between that mine to fork process, and I think you'll hear that from every ag person, there's a lot of factors that go into that. And so much of it is our supply chain, our transportation availability, all those different things, border issues, tariffs, you name it. And any upset in that chain can have a dramatic effect on getting your food to the final destination. And I think, unfortunately, I've had this conversation with ag folks. Far too many people in probably Canada and America don't truly understand agriculture and don't truly understand what goes into getting their food to them. I think some honestly believe that it just magically appears on the restaurant plate or just magically appears in the grocery store, but that's obviously not the case. So we have four great panelists today to talk about this issue. I'm just going to quickly introduce them. You'll see their bios in the Whova app for the interest of time. So we're joined today by Tara Sawyer, Minister of Agriculture from the Government of Alberta, Jennifer Riddle, External Affairs for Tidewater, Doug Roxburgh, Chair of the Alberta Beef Producers, and virtually we are joined by Mathieu Grenier, apologize if I butchered that name, Executive Director with the Transportation Canada. So we're going to set this up and allow each panelist to kind of do some opening remarks, and then we'll go into questions. And don't forget, we have the Whova app if you have any questions that you'd like to bring forward to the panelist as this moves along. So I thought we'd start with Minister Sawyer. She's going to share the value of transportation corridors to agriculture, to Alberta's agriculture economy. Minister?
Thanks very much. Pardon me. For those of you who were in the last session, I've got a tickle, so I've got a throat lozenge in the corner of my cheek. Pardon me for I'll try and speak without coughing on this next panel. But it is my pleasure to be here and be able to share the stage actually with everyone, and I'm looking forward to everybody else's perspectives. Discussions like this that we're going to have are crucial to making meaningful change across our sector. Everybody in this room knows working in ag comes with significant challenges. These are familiar to processors and producers of all shapes and sizes in every corner of our industry, from drought and extreme weather to crop disease and animal health, to production setbacks, obstacles to market access, and the reason for this session, transportation and supply chain issues. Transportation and supply chain is a linchpin in our food system. And how do we address those challenges to make sure we're getting products where they need to go? Big question. We're in the room all here together because we know it starts with collaboration. Frankly, I think I've said that word so much you could turn it into a drinking game at this point, because I think in the last session and this one, I've said it in every sentence. But that's how key and important it is. Strong network of supply chains and transportation corridors, not only east to west, but also north to south, is necessary to support production and get our goods to market. These intertwined systems involve the work of many individuals and organizations, and there are a lot of moving parts. Alberta's supply chain spans the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, and our ag products move long distances to reach our consumers. Our economy is highly integrated with our neighbors to the south, and the U.S. is Alberta's most important export market. In 2025, we exported $8.7 billion in ag products to the United States, and that was via road, rail, and air. Exports included canola seed, canola meal, canola oil, processed potatoes, and we cannot forget the world-renowned Alberta beef. Last year alone, we exported nearly 400,000 head of live cattle and $3 billion in beef to the U.S. processing plants and to consumers. Alberta imports fruits and vegetables, food products, live cattle, and beverages from the U.S., and Canada is the top export market for 36 states. The majority of PNWER states are in our top 10 U.S. agri-food markets. That's Montana, Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. Our ag food exports to all 5 PNWER states totaled $1.2 billion last year. That's US, nearly 20% of all US agri-food exports. And we all know the Alberta-US ag trade relationship is mutually beneficial and supports industries on both sides of the border. That's what we were discussing quite a bit in the last session. And with this level of integration, we have to always work to improve transportation networks and make sure those supply chains stay strong and resilient. The success of all our ag sectors depends on reliable connections, access to markets, and efficient border crossings. Reliable networks and supply chains are also crucial for our industries to remain competitive and for food security. That product must get from the farmer to the processors, then to the distribution centers and retailers before it makes its final stop at everybody's dinner tables. Every stop along the way is necessary, and we do need to identify each one to ensure products make the journey as efficiently as possible. The demand for ag products from Alberta and Western Canada is on the rise, especially in the Asia-Pacific region. The PNWER region is uniquely positioned to benefit from this rising demand. So because of this, we have seen some strain on the supply chain in recent years. I think that's an understatement. For example, our producers rely on a combination of railways and marine ports to get their product to their destination. The average length of a rail haul to a port in Western Canada is more than 1,500 kilometers. We are landlocked. And most of Alberta's ocean shipments of grain and oilseed move through the port of Vancouver. In 2025, roughly 30 million metric tons of Western Canadian grains, pulses, and oilseeds moved through the port of Vancouver. Supply chain gaps significantly slow the transportation of those goods, and this vulnerability puts our exports, our reputation, and our producers' profitability at risk. There's a wide variety of issues contributing to those gaps: insufficient operating capacity, communication delays, seasonal surges in demand, winter weather, and federal red tape are just some of the challenges in the current system. There is a lot of work that needs to be done to address these obstacles, but thankfully, we're putting the work in together. We know that continued investment in building and maintaining critical infrastructure, as well as addressing labor disruption, is vital to our success. You might have heard about Alberta's extensive highway network in the Economic Corridor session with my colleague, Minister Devin Dreeshen. He's our Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors. Our ministries work closely together to provide support, advice, and data from an agricultural perspective. And I would add, the advantage to that is both Devin and I also happen, not only are we central Alberta, but we both come from and are farmers. So he understands it uniquely, which is such a benefit. Ensuring the voices of our stakeholders are being heard and work is being done to meet the diverse needs is important. We were pleased to see Transport Canada announce a new $5 billion investment in a trade diversification corridor initiative last year. And that's going to strengthen corridors across ports, rail, and roads to ensure efficient access to global markets. That's a key point: efficient access. Our province is also targeting improvements on major highways to maintain our road network of approximately 64,000 lane kilometers. For our friends ourselves, that's 40,000 miles, and more than 4,800 bridges and interchanges. Alberta's 3-year capital plan has set aside money for planning, design, and construction of highways and major bridge construction, as well as highway rehabilitation, because we know how important smooth and efficient transportation is to support growing trade demands. We continue to advocate regularly with the Government of Canada for continued improvement and investment to increase capacity of ports and border crossings. Alberta closely monitors rail and port access and advocates for improved access to our ag products to market. While leading international trade missions to grow our exports and strengthen relationships by promoting our province as a reliable trading partner. Continued collaboration is helping us get better coordination and increased efficiency so we can meet demands and keep feeding families. I look forward to the continued work of those before me and with our partners to improve efficiency and increase opportunities across the board. Thank you all for letting me be here. PNWER's work is important. We need to continue, as I said before, that dialogue with one another as we are sharing those same real challenges. I'm looking forward to continuing to strengthen those relationships and exploring ways we can work together. As a farmer myself, putting food on dinner tables is important. It's what I do every day, and getting it onto those store shelves. And I will say your comment earlier, I married the farmer. I grew up in the city. I'm the first one who can acknowledge that rural urban divide because I didn't think about where my food came from. I went to the grocery store. That's why I've spent almost 30 years changing that narrative. So there are challenges with our transportation, but I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister Sawyer. And let's turn it over to Doug now to talk about Alberta's beef industry.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone. Certainly a pleasure to be here and my honor to be joined by our panelists here. It's, I think I'm a thorn beside two roses as I sit up here this morning. But yeah, Chair of Alberta Beef Producers, I'm just going to maybe give a quick oversight on, how important, PNWER region is to the cattle industry. And I think the cattle industry is really a definition of why PNWER is so important as we move forward. So our industry depends on a seamless movement of animals, feed, products, and people across provinces, states, and national borders. Reliable transportation infrastructure and fundamental for food production and supply chain resilience. So in Alberta alone, the beef industry contributes more than $4 billion to GDP and supports over 55,000 jobs. Canada and the United States share one of the most integrated beef supply chains in the world, and I can't emphasize this enough. In 2024, Canada exported nearly $4 billion in beef and more than $2 billion in live cattle to the United States. Canada also imported more than $1 billion in beef and over $500 million in live cattle from the United States. And just recently, we had a Montana delegation come up on behalf of the cattle producers, and they spoke about how important trade was with Canada. And they said that when Canadian buyers are at U.S. auction marts in Montana, it is a price of approximately 8 to 12 cents per hundredweight increase when Canada is sitting at that table and in their auction marts. Canada also imported more than $1 billion in beef and over $5 million in live cattle from the United States. Those numbers reflect a highly connected system where products often cross borders multiple times to consumers. I know we've talked about tariffs in the past, and we hear that single number that's presented, but it's really important to understand that as beef trades back and forth, both in the live form and as boxed, it was communicated to us that that tariff at a 25% rate could represent 125% tariff added to a final cut of beef that was sitting on retail shelves for our end consumer. So just really speaking to the importance of that. Every day, cattle, feed, trucks, rail cars, processors, and export facilities operate as part of a shared North American supply chain. Freight corridors, American feeder cattle moving north from Montana and many other states. More recently, we've seen cattle, beef on dairy calves, import into Canada as far north or coming from as far south as Kentucky. Feed ingredients such as U.S. corn moving into Alberta feedlots. Most of our feeding sector in southern Alberta right now uses corn as their main feed source. It's actually cheaper and more efficient to rail it up from states like Nebraska. So when the United States talks about sitting on a surplus of corn inventory, Canada really becomes an important export market for them to help chew through that supply. Saskatchewan barley and other feed grains move throughout Western Canada, and the movement of distillers' grains and other feed products used in the cattle rations here in Alberta. These transportation networks allow producers and processors to source inputs when they need and when they need them. A supportive freight corridor benefits the cattle industry, which benefits society and the overall economy. For the cattle industry, transportation is not optional. Feed absolutely has to arrive, animals have to move, and beef products have to reach consumers and export markets. Transportation disruptions quickly create operational challenges across the supply chain. And in severe situations, these disruptions can actually cause animal welfare concerns, business opportunity, and food supply concerns for our end consumers. Reliable freight corridors are not simply infrastructure assets, they are strategic assets for our region. Supply chains are also only as strong as their weakest link. We've seen a range of factors affect transportation reliability. I mean, for one, extreme weather, tariffs and border uncertainty, border disruptions and closures, labor disruptions, infrastructure constraints and bottlenecks. Even short-term disruptions can have significant consequences when we have such a highly integrated agriculture supply chain. Strengthening freight corridors supports economic growth on both sides of the border. Efficient transportation improves competitiveness for producers, processors, and exporters. Maintaining reliable cross-border movement strengthens one of the most integrated economic systems in North America. Just recently, we had delegation from Utah come up, and they spoke that the harvest facility in Utah at some points in the year can be upwards of 30% of their harvest capacity. And if they lose that integration with fat cattle leaving southern Alberta and coming down, it would decrease the efficiency of their harvest facility, likely to the point where it would maybe potentially shut them down. Certainly don't want to see that. Continued collaboration through PNWER helps identify regional solutions to shared transportation and challenges. So, what does Alberta beef producers bring to the conversation? It's a great question, Tara. I'm glad you asked. To understand what Alberta beef brings to the conversation, we should first quickly see the chart about the chat about our commission. Alberta Beef Producers works on behalf of nearly 18,000 producers here in the province. We work in areas of government relations and policy, communications, marketing, research and development, and stewardship. Sorry, my table's not quite big enough here. We are funded by a checkoff and dollars led by a board of directors and elected into our delegate body. All directors and our delegates, are cattle producers. And it just so happens that a number of our staff are also current and past producers themselves. ABP serves as a bridge between policy discussion and on-the-ground industry. We are producer-led and have a direct insight into what happens across the cattle sector in real time. We bring practical producers' experience and operational knowledge and transportation discussions. That perspective helps ensure that the policies and the infrastructure investments reflect real-world supply chains and the needs. Government and industry need both top-down policy expertise and bottom-up operational understanding, and ABP helps connect those two perspectives. So, in closing, the beef industry depends on reliable, efficient, and resilient transportation networks, investment in freight corridors, rail capacity infrastructure, and open cross-border trade benefits producers, consumers, and border-related economies. ABP looks forward to working with the PNWER partners to help strengthen transportation systems and support agriculture and security across our region. And we look forward to the discussion here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Just as a quick reminder, as we're working through the presentations here, if any questions come to mind, please put them in the Whova app, and we have time for questions toward the end. So our next presenter is Jennifer Riddle with Tidewater.
Good morning, everybody. I tend to talk with my hands, so having a microphone in one could be dangerous for myself. So I'm just going to stand here at the podium. I'm Jennifer Riddle. I'm Tidewater's corporate communications and marketing manager, and I do their government affairs as well. And I'm just so excited to be here today to talk about Tidewater and what we do. We are a huge part of the supply chain in the Pacific Northwest. And now, come to find out, I came here and I learned so much more about how we're part of the entire supply chain, including Canada. And I can't wait to go through this with you. But before we do, I'm just going to give you a quick overview. We've been around 94 years. Our barge line is our backbone of our company. Then in 1950, we opened up terminals along the Columbia Snake River system. And that essentially made us multimodal. And then we got West Coast Marine Cleaning, which is Tidewater Environmental Services. We move hazardous and non-hazardous waste. Actually, we come up and we service cruise ships that come into the Vancouver Harbor, into Seattle, and clean all their tanks. We also have Tidewater Canada. You may be familiar with it as Island Tug and Barge. We purchased it back in 2017, and now it's called Tidewater Canada. We have articulated tugs and barges that move energy to Vancouver Island. We supply about 70% of the energy needs into Vancouver Island. So that's kind of our overall umbrella under Tidewater. But what I want to talk about here is the Columbia Snake River system. I know there's a lot of information on this one slide, but essentially you've got from the mouth of the Columbia, which, by the way, little known fact you can put in your pocket for later, but the Columbia River is actually dumps more water into the Pacific Ocean than any river in North or South America. It's that large, it's that robust, and it's right here in our region. So from the mouth of the Columbia all the way to the I-5 bridge, or what you would consider Vancouver, Washington, Portland area, that deep draft channel is 43 feet deep, 600 feet wide. That's where all of those Panamax ships come in, get the grain that we're producing and moving downriver by barge. They also export potash. You name it, it comes in or it gets exported in that deep draft channel. From that I-5 bridge in the Vancouver area all the way to Lewiston, Idaho, making Lewiston, Idaho a seaport. Can you believe it? Those miles are only 14-foot draft. That's where Tidewater comes in. All of our barges and tugs, they draft no more than 14 feet. Does that make them less likely to move a lot of product? Not at all. And I'll tell you how. If you haven't had an opportunity, so I came here a couple days before this conference and I was told by Bruce Agnew here, you got to go to the Icefields Parkway. What an incredible experience. I took so many photos and shared it with my friends and family, and they're going to come up and visit. When you come down to the Pacific Northwest, if you ever come to Washington or Oregon and you're along that Columbia River, please stop by in Bonneville Dam, John Day Dam. Come and see the infrastructure that we put a lot of money into. The Army Corps does an amazing job at maintaining this infrastructure. I mean, look at that. I put it in meters, so I hope that all makes sense. I hope I did that correctly. And I used, instead of the Space Needle, I used the Calgary Tower and a local tower here. So that's how big it is. I mean, just imagine you're on, and I'll use soccer here. You're at the net and you're looking at the other net on the other side of the field, and then you add a whole nother field to it. That's how much product we're moving on the river system. And we're not the only transporter on the river system. We're just the largest and the best. But and we move a huge diverse amount of commodities. So, and I'll get into that a little bit more. So please visit. Come. I put my card on some of the table. I didn't have enough to fill out all, but if you're in the area, look me up. If you're in the Tri-Cities, which is kind of on the eastern part of Washington, where we have our flagship terminal, look me up. Give me a call. Happy to give you a tour. So all of our assets, unlike the Mississippi River, those assets, those barges and tugs could not be on the Columbia Snake River system and vice versa. Every tug that we manufacture, every barge, it's all to make as much. Did it not say? So we have 1 foot, I don't know what that is in meters, but 1 foot on either side when we go into those navigation locks. That's how incredibly precise and purpose-built our assets are. For instance, one of our tugs is about $20 million to manufacture. However, we're working in brown water, so we're not working in the ocean. Those 3 ships, those 3 tugs right there will be on the river system long after my kids' have kids. I mean, we have an asset that we just sold, if you can believe it, that was 90 years old. The hull was from World War II. So it's incredible. And we maintain it. We have our own shipyard in Vancouver. We have our own shipyard. That's incredible. We have a dry dock. We have the ability to essentially build a boat if we wanted to, but essentially it's to maintain our own assets. This is a freight comparison. This is what I'm talking about. This is what makes the Columbia Snake River so important. One of our barges is 134 trucks. We always try our best to do 4 barges in a tow. A tow is when you put them all together, so we're called towboats. That's 538 trucks. That's a lot. And again, we're not the only mover on the river. And again, we move 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. We don't take a break. And guess what? Weather doesn't affect us. We're on that river system. Okay, I take that back. When we had a forest fire in the Columbia Gorge and it jumped the river from Oregon to Washington, then we didn't move. But that was it. Okay, let's go on. Energy efficiency, barging. I know we all talk about different forms of transportation, but I really want to point out how energy efficient barging is. You're going to get the most bang for your buck. It's going to be cost effective for the producers, for the farmers. That's why they use us. We're the cheapest. And guess what? We're the most energy efficient. So at the end of the day, they can tell whatever constituent, or they can tell their MLAs, or they can tell their legislators, hey, we use the greenest way of moving product. 675 miles, 1 ton, 1 gallon of diesel. We can move that ton, 675 miles, a truck, 151. But I have to stress that we need all of the modes of transportation. It is a 3-legged stool. If you take any one of those out, our system would collapse. Safety impacts, this is just another little slide. I won't go over too much, but for one injury for tugs, you've got 1,146 for trucks. That's because they're on the roadway right next to us and it's raining or it's snowing. It's dangerous for a passenger or for a vehicle that you're driving. So less trucks on the road, the better for everybody. And there's no way you could take those volumes and try and put them on trucks because 1, we don't have the labor for that. 2, we don't have the cabs for that. And we don't have the infrastructure for that. And this is what's so amazing is that the Columbia Snake River has capacity to grow. Look at these photos. You can see in the distance a 2-barge tow, and you can see that might be BNSF or UP. You cannot add more rail line to that berm. You cannot add more rail line, 1, because in 1986, President Ronald Reagan put into place the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Act. That's 85 miles. You can't do anything. 85 miles along that riverway. You can't blow another tunnel into that, and you can't add roadway. So what is that? That leaves barging. And we have, like I said, capacity at the lock systems. We're not lined up like trucks are at ports or in rails into rail yards. We're not lined up. We're not congested at all. So bring your product down to the Columbia Snake River system. And guess what? You already are from Canada. What do we do? What do we move? We move grain. I'll get into that more because I want to get into the supply chains. Petroleum, paper products, ethanol, solid waste, liquid fertilizer, and special projects. I'm going to highlight some of the ones that I think really make the synergies between Canada and the US. Petroleum, big. Here we are. We have Edmonton right where we're at. You've got the crude oil coming into the Trans Mountain Pipeline, going into Vancouver, maybe hitting the Puget Sound Pipeline into the 5 refineries that are in that area. There's actually 4, and then there's 1 down in Olympia. Then once that's refined, that product goes onto the Olympic pipeline down to the Portland market. How does Oregon get their energy needs when they have 0 refineries? How does Idaho get their energy needs? 0 refineries. You have 4 in Montana, 5 in Salt Lake City, and then you have 5 in Washington. So essentially what we do, Tidewater, is we get that product where it's produced to where it's needed. And that's where we come in. We're the eastern arm of the Olympic pipeline. So that product comes down into Portland. We pull that off, put it on state-of-the-art, double-hulled petroleum barges, and we move it east. We move it into the Tri-Cities for what? Agriculture. All those combines, they need diesel. Aerospace, we have Air Force, Fairchild Air Force Base right there. And guess what? We have pipelines directly from our terminal. Oh, actually, I guess we're not going to have the other photos, but directly from our terminal to BNSF. So our Pasco terminal, which is right at the confluence of the Snake River and the Columbia River in Pasco, Washington, it's a huge, it has a capacity for 23.5 million gallons. Like it's a huge facility, and it feeds energy needs to everybody in the region, including Idaho. So that product lands there, and guess what? BNSF, Class A rail, we have a pipeline directly to gas them up. Over in Umatilla, which is in Oregon, same thing. We have a pipeline from our Umatilla terminal all the way to Hinkle Rail Yard for the UP. They utilize the product that's coming out of Edmonton all the way through and lands right in their backyard. That's pretty amazing for a supply chain, I think. Ethanol. We all know ethanol, you've been at the gas station, blends at 10%, sometimes 15, depending on what the president wants. But right now it's 10% pretty much across the board. How does that ethanol get to blend right there in the Portland market, anywhere? That product, corn, produced in the Midwest. Rail cars into our terminal there at the Snake River, and then they get offloaded, put into barges, and taken into Portland. So if you're in the Portland, Southwest Washington area, heck, maybe even up to the Olympia, that product, that ethanol is going to be blended into that gasoline that comes off the Olympic pipeline. And that comes, again, by barge. I wish I had the photos. They were photos of our terminal so you could have a better idea what I'm talking about. Grain supply, although they might have done that because I could go on and on. So we have 26 river elevators on the Columbia Snake River system. 16 of them are on the Snake River. And I just want to make a little point about the Snake River. There's 4 dams on the Snake River, and those have been highly litigated over the course of nearly 30 years since they were kind of put in place. And I'll just make it very simple. If any of those dams are breached, Tidewater can't do what we do. Our huge flagship terminal right there that I just talked about, that's on the Snake River. We call it the Snake River Terminal. If those dams are removed, that water decreases by 100 feet. That would not only affect us as navigators, but irrigators, because now all of a sudden those pumps, that water is not available. So lower Snake River dams, very important to us to remain intact. Not only that, 3,000 megawatts of hydropower. Okay, you have all of these grain elevators, river elevators along the way. We take our barges, we get that grain from the 11,000 farmers in the area, soft white wheat, super incredible out there as far as the product itself, crackers, cookies, cakes, you like all that stuff, noodles, that's all soft white wheat. Guess what? The Palouse grows the best soft white wheat in the entire world. There's only 4 or 5 other places that do: Russia, Ukraine, Australia, and some in China. So when we're talking Japan and South Korea and Philippines and Indonesia and all of those places on the Pacific Rim, they want our soft white wheat. They can't grow it. They want ours so that they can make their cookies and cakes and feed their people. Again, each one of these river elevators cannot get rail to it, but we need the trucks. The trucks bring the grain into the river elevators, but they cannot get rail. Oh my gosh, I know I'm fertilizer. That's another one. Okay. So UAN 32, liquid fertilizer. Guess what? If we didn't have your guys' natural gas, we wouldn't have UAN 32. We would not have that as a fertilizer in the States. It's so important. It is a safe, effective fertilizer for the wheat farmers out there and the grain farmers and the potato and the cherry and the apples. So when I say that the natural gas comes in, either the producer takes that natural gas and makes it into ammonia nitrate, and urea and makes that UAN 32 product, or it comes in already pre-produced, and then we move it by barge to where it's most likely to be distributed to the people who need it, the end consumers. Oh, and we also move garbage. And that's another, I'm just pointing this out because a lot of the different municipalities, North Puget Sound area, are struggling because their municipal landfills are full. And they're not going to build new ones, especially when you can have these gigantic state-run, state/private ones that are on the east side of the Cascades where there's less rain, less potential of contaminating any kind of groundwater, and a lot more land. So what we do is we take, on the rainy side, we take all that garbage, we compact it into containers, and we move it to the eastern part where it's offloaded at one of our terminals and taken to a huge landfill. Safety, because we move petroleum on the river system, you can only imagine 190 times we are audited a year by 42 different agencies, customers, and regulation Regulators, I'll get it. There we go. And so safety is the number one goal of our company. And here are just some of our longstanding relationships. I guarantee you, if you don't recognize at least 10 of those, you will. I'll just say that. And that's it. Thank you so much. And thank you, Bruce, for the invitation.
All right. Thank you very much for that presentation. We have one more presentation before we get into some Q&A. And this one where it's coming to us virtually, Mathieu Grenier from Transport Canada. Welcome. It's like we need some volume.
Can you hear me now?
We're working on getting your volume turned up for you.
Can you hear me now? No. Let me know if you can hear me.
Yeah, just up a little bit louder. We almost got it.
Oh, all good. Can you?
There we
hear
go.
me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Okay, very good. Can you see my screen? I'm sharing my presentation now.
Yep, we got it.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to go in presentation mode and
There we go.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much for the invitation today. I know there was a bit of last-minute change. Christiane, our chief economist, was supposed to attend, but happy to be here virtually. Would have liked to be here in person with you today, but maybe next time. So, what I'd like to do today is a bit of a first discuss the strategic importance of the Pacific Northwest region for agri-food, and it's going to echo a bit of the previous panelist on that. I mean, what we see here is annually $28 billion of agri-food sourced from the Pacific Northwest region is traded bilaterally Canada-US. And the figures here are in the Canadian dollars just for consistency. And the vast majority of the trade is done by truck. So we're talking about 82% of US bound, agri-food transported by truck. The rest of it is the rest of it is mostly rail. Lots of it grain. Grain is notably moved by rail. And the trade bound to Canada, 98% is transported by truck. So the system is heavily reliant on the efficiency of road infrastructure, but also the border crossings. Top Canadian exports to the US include live cattle, meat, animal feed, and vegetable oils, while the top agri-food exports from the Pacific Northwest region to Canada includes live animal, fresh fruit, seafood, but also vegetable. And it was mentioned earlier, but also want to mention that this region not only served the West, but obviously served the rest of Canadian province, but also the rest of the U.S. states. So we're talking about 3/4 of the movement is destined to these other states and provinces outside of the region here. The region is also a key region, a key exporter of agri-food, around the world. We're talking about 47 billion, 48 billion roughly in goods exported internationally. And about 60% of these goods are exported to Asia. So Asia is the big market here. Top Canadian export internationally are wheat, canola, specialty grain like lentils and peas, but also meat and animal feed. From a U.S. perspective, the export internationally, we're talking about corn, obviously, wheat, frozen fish, vegetable, and soybeans. So quite a big market with a heavy, leaning towards Asia there. And so this is the bit of the strategic importance of this region. So when we look ahead, well, we see increased opportunity for the sector to continue expanding, notably in Asia. So the map here shows a projection for the next 10 years of gross domestic product for different countries in the world. And the circle or the oval here are the primary destination export for the Pacific Northwest overseas export there. So rapidly expanding population in some of the emerging countries like Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, but also Malaysia. We're talking about Pakistan and Vietnam, which has been growing quite fast over the past few years. That will drive demand for agri-food product in the next decade. Beyond population size, the purchasing power is also shifting in these countries. So it's not about it's not just about the mouth to feed. It's about the rapidly expanding middle class in those countries with rising disposable income across the Southeast Asia in those countries. So what does it mean? It means that the dietary transition toward higher value product. So shifting from basic calories to higher protein and value added food, talking about pulse, canola oil, some specialty grain I mentioned just before, high grade wheat and processed agri product. Of course, there's also rapid urbanization in these countries, notably Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So expanding modern grocery retail store, food services sector, which creates this demand for import of these higher value products from the US and from Canada there. So to seize these market opportunities, we need to ensure the movement of goods are efficient, but also reliable. So from mostly here, it's from mostly Canadian perspective, but it's mean having reliable, efficient road and border crossing system. So as I mentioned earlier, a vast majority of the goods traded Canada, US is done by truck. And if we look at the slide here, you see two elements. The map shows the road congestion in Western Canadian provinces. So the darker the color is, the more congestion there is. And we're talking about here for an average for the past year or quarters for the afternoon rush hours. And what we see, well, obviously it's concentrated in urban areas, which is impeding the first mile and last mile of the supply chain, adding cost, reducing competitiveness, but also to a certain extent reducing the reliability of those supply chains. So lots of the growing, and I assume the cattle part are outside of these urban areas, but all the food manufacturing business are located in urban areas, but also the access to the end consumer. So adding cost, adding time, lowering reliability, which has an impact down the line to the consumer level. So the slide shows this, but also on the right-hand side, we have the median truck border wait time estimate. So it shows, and these are for some of the key crossing in Western Canada. So to the US, Pacific Highway, Huntington, Kingsgate, and Coutts in Alberta. Looking at the border wait time, well, we see that based on our estimates for these are trucking wait time, it remains fluid overall with wait time less than 10 minutes. And if you see from the blue line, it hasn't shifted a lot from the 3-year average. So it's mostly stable here. So overall, it's those border crossings are still fluid, and we need to maintain them fluid so it doesn't hinder the trade between the two countries. So this is more from a Canada-US perspective. So now if we look at the more export side of thing, this is from a Canadian perspective here. There was a bunch of disruptions over the past, I would say, 5-6 years, including like the wildfires, flooding, labor disruptions, which impacted the fluidity, the efficiency of supply chain in Canada, but also internationally. So And at the same time, of all these disruptions, the production of agri-food has increased, to ports. So we're talking about around 6 million tons, up from 2024. And despite having more volume and having more maybe disruption in the system, the system overall performance has been sustained, and it's a bit what you can see on the right hand side of the chart here. It represents the end-to-end transit time to export grain from Saskatchewan to China via the port of Vancouver. So, the latest data we have is sometimes in the winter of 2025, 2026, and the time was below the 40-day mark there. Of course, there's seasonal peaks during the winter where the supply chain's capacity is reduced because of the cold, which reduced the capacity of railways to bring those goods to ports. They need to run the shorter train and they need to run slower. But overall, it seems that the performance has been sustained there. That doesn't mean there's no bottlenecks. This is a bit more of a macro picture. There's still bottlenecks. There's still seasonality issues in the system that creates those longer transit time. But from a macro perspective, it's pretty stable there. So. From a Government of Canada perspective, so the government, is taking action to ensure those goods are moved efficiently to and from domestic markets and also international markets, really to seize those opportunities I was referring to. So there's about 5 areas where the government has been putting effort on. The first one, it was mentioned before, the investing in infrastructure to alleviate those critical bottlenecks, but also to open new markets and seize those opportunities. So the Trade Diversification Infrastructure Fund, that $5 billion that Madame Sawyer was referring to, is one area where there's been investment. Currently, Transport Canada is receiving proposals for investments, and they're being assessed for a probable announcement of funding sometimes in the fall by the minister. Also, strengthening port, but also ports is quite important. Ports efficiency is important. The government has launched a consultation a few months ago on that initiative that's called Strengthening One Canadian Economy. And as part of the consultation, the governance of ports is part of the discussion to make them more efficient, more nimble, have better capacity to invest, making them more efficient there. As part of the consultation, we're also looking at enhancing labor stability. I mentioned disruptions in the past, including some of those labor disruptions. We're looking to have a better, stable labor relation there to minimize those disruptions. Of course, the government needs to strike a right balance between employers and employees there, while respecting, the right to strike and lock out from both sides. So options are being explored, and I think some more consultation would happen late summer and during the fall on this specific element there. A third element is streamlining regulation and accelerating approval process. You've seen Prime Minister Carney designating some of the project of national interest to help speed up the approval, whether it's from a regulatory perspective, environmental perspective, streamlining, for example, provincial and the federal level environmental assessment to really speed up those projects there. There's also an exercise to look at the regulation. Lots of regulation in the transportation system. It's probably the most regulated sector, in Canada at least. There are good reasons for that. Obviously, when you take the plane, you're happy that it was inspected and it's very safe. But there's probably an exercise to do to make sure those regulations are streamlined. Fourth element is drive digital infrastructure and digital trade. So, I mean, Canada is lagging behind some of its competitor when it comes to digital infrastructure. The maturity level of different sector in transportation is uneven. Some sector are more digitalized and have more digital infrastructure. I'm thinking of the air sector. Some are less digitalized. So there's an opportunity to invest more into this, and also the processes of trading. Some not regulation, but some process still requires a paper-based form, a paper-based signature, while this could be so much more efficient to have it digital. So these process, so the government is, as part of this consultation, is also exploring ways to better to drive digital trade to make the system more efficient. And the final thing I would say, and I'm going to conclude with that, is coordination and optimization. So, how we can better position those gateways and those, all the players, all the stakeholders, to make sure there's good coordination, operational coordination, but also planning coordination. If you plan to expand such an infrastructure, maybe it's going to have an impact down the line. Is there a way to optimize or better exchange data, for example, or short-term planning to better optimize the exchange of goods, between the modes, for example. So these are a bit of the 5 areas that the government is looking to improve basically the efficiency of the supply chain. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you for the invitation, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mathieu. Just at your you leave a bunch of conclusions, that things to improve the supply chain and transportation. So maybe we can nail it down with the panel a little bit. From the panel's perspective, what investments would make the most practical impact for agriculture? What would you prioritize if you had that option? Feel free. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I'd prioritize waterways. So of course I would. I think that they're unsung heroes of transportation, and we have, a great coastline. We have a great Columbia Snake River system, and I think we just need to, utilize that more. So that's where I would invest.
I would go straight to probably because it's a personal frustration that I feel our sector has been hammering home and asking from the federal government for a very long time. So pardon my rant, but agriculture should be an essential service in our transportation routes. Full stop. It's beyond frustrating. I told you you're getting a rant. It's beyond frustrating. The number of labor disruptions that happen at a key time for our producers that will turn around will make us uncompetitive when we're not getting our products to market. And I've been on those trade missions where, I've had them say that to me, and we have been, I like to see the head nods. Yeah, it's not just my rant, because this is an ongoing frustration. And if we could fix that piece first of all, because yes, there's the infrastructure and the investment that has to happen for sure. And that's the other piece. We have been on for a very long time on that as well. And it was not a priority, which is crazy to me, how improving our infrastructure, especially, we are a landlocked province. Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, we're landlocked. Alberta is, and so we rely heavily. I mean, everything's going to the port. And I don't think it's a coincidence that every time our harvest comes around and we have that tight schedule, that's when all the labor disruptions start, and they have us over a barrel. There's my rant. It needs to be fixed like yesterday.
No. Maybe not so much of a rant, but I do want to be cautious of how I word this or phrase this, because we are here, with the PNWER region, and we certainly understand that. But right now, we have a feeding infrastructure in southern Alberta that relies extremely heavily on imported grains from states like Nebraska, Iowa, to feed their cattle. And when we visit with feed yards in southern Alberta right now, it's communicated to us that they can rail corn in from the south cheaper and more efficiently than we can truck or rail barley that we grow in Saskatchewan. And so we certainly understand that feeding corn is a valuable commodity within our infrastructure. Most of our feed yards are going the way of feeding corn because they understand that's the reliability of where they can source that product and how they can get it there. But we have a ingredient, we have a commodity that we raise here in Canada. And yes, some of it does get, sent south of the border and hits the waterways as it's been communicated. But I think we have a challenge in terms of understanding how we move some of our own ingredients, within our own country, even into some of the northern states like Montana and Idaho. And again, this maybe gets a little bit into left field, but right now, as we do talk about concerns around, tariffs and borders and things like that, we have a very weak infrastructure to be able to get both live cattle and, more importantly, boxed beef into Eastern Canada. And that does speak to why PNWER is so important to us, because we can more efficiently get fat cattle from southern Alberta into the central part of Utah for their harvest capacity and harvest systems. But if we look at it as a big picture, we also have a population based on the East Coast here in Canada that we need to focus on serving. So respecting that we're here as PNWER and we're working within those constraints, but we've got friends from Saskatchewan. I certainly don't believe they would be disappointed if we looked at infrastructure improvements to get some of their great grains into the feed yards in southern Alberta as well. So,
all right, great, thank you, Mathieu. Do you have any thoughts on this? I know on some of the options you incorporated technology improvements. Any thoughts on where we could go in that area or anything else?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I did mention infrastructure, that 5 billion fund, which is basically divided into 3 streams. The project of to strengthen those national corridors. Stream 2 goes into more collaborative solution, and it goes to a bit of the coordination and technology, increasing the visibility of supply chain is also something important. I mean, when we talk to ports, to transportation stakeholders, they basically say, like, we don't know what's coming in the supply chain. We have not good visibility on the rail car. We don't have good visibility on what's coming by ship. So there's really a need to foster more collaboration and increase that visibility in the supply chain, from the producer to the transportation to the end market, to increase those capacity. It does have an effect on capacity. Talking just anecdotally to a port on the East Coast, they were collaborating for this grain season with the grain provider, and they told me, well, we almost doubled what we could accommodate in terms of rail car at the port. So there's really a benefit into collaboration, visibility beyond the bricks and mortar infrastructure envelope that I mentioned earlier.
Great, thank you. So just a reminder, if you have a question, if you want to put something in the Who app, we did have one come through, and it kind of builds on some of the concerns we've already raised. And, just speaking on the U.S. side of things as well, I mean, port stability and labor disruptions, and that's been difficulty for us in the U.S. as well. So the question, they're looking for more detail on enhancing labor stability by how is that to be done? What can you do to stop the things that you were concerned about?
So you're going first.
Feel free to jump right in.
No, I can't say what I would like to say, which I think would fix it. I mean, at the end of the day, when we can have up to, I think, like 8 labor disruptions just in the year alone, the number we have, and in the US, I think you've only had like 2 in 50 years or something, I believe the numbers are. Like, again, can't say what I want to say to that. That's a swear word. Like, you've got it figured out.
Sort of.
Well, somehow you've allowed
doing better than you. So
what you've done is, again, first of all, it is feeding people. How is this not an essential service? I have all kinds of lovely numbers of other things off the side of labor that I would say. I mean, I'll put a positive spin so I don't sound like a cranky pants. Because I will say they are working on better data collection. And I've got nice little numbers I guess I could share because, yeah, you've got the National Supply Chain Office. It's coordinating data sharing. You got the real-time tracking with the Port of Vancouver. It's monitoring containers. The Ag Transport Coalition, which is funded by grain producers and shippers, is collecting data. So the three of them are all collecting data to find better ways on, and we get those reports, like they're out so that we can see how things are moving, where there might be backlogs, because, and that is a positive. That's good, because it's not just about to say, okay, how do we when we have a good supply chain issue? The bigger question is, how are we responding when we have a disruption, and how quickly can we pivot and get things back and moving? Because I can tell you, every day, the amount of money being lost while it sits there, and you've got producers, they don't get paid until that grain is delivered. So when you talk about producers who have tight margins, now we have a disruption. That actually affects them at the farm gate as well. So there are positive movements, that data collection, and then from there they can make their plan for improvements. You know, I'll give them a positive on that one.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else like to weigh in?
Yeah, I just kind of want to describe a cautionary tale that happened in our region. About 10 years ago, Terminal 6 at the Port of Portland, they had a labor dispute with the manager of that terminal, which is a container terminal. Tidewater used to move containers from Lewiston, Idaho, filled with ag products, lentils, beans, etc., to that terminal, where it would then get unloaded to one of those container ships, and off it would go to the global markets. That labor dispute essentially made that terminal a ghost town until recently. Actually, the state of Oregon had to give quite a few $1 million to keep that terminal running in the interim. It almost closed down. That supply chain we're trying to get back now. Once those supply chains are gone, they're nearly impossible to get back. All of those ag products are trucked into Olympia and Tacoma and Seattle now. They're like, why are we going to put it back on barge? Even though it's cheaper, faster, and more reliable, they have their supply chain. That's what they know for the last decade. So just a little cautionary tale. It's so important to, federal government come in, something state, to help negotiate those kinds of labor disputes so you don't completely eradicate an entire supply chain that helps the ag and the farmers out there. So
Great. Any other thoughts from the panelists?
Just maybe to echo that, they were measuring. There were lots of labor disruptions. I concur with that over the past 5-6 years. And the costs are heavy for Canada in the sense that lost market share for some sectors. Bad reputation also internationally. For Canada, we talk about once the supply chain move away, there's some persistency, and supply chain not coming back. So there we observe that not only in Canada but in North America, but it's well documented in the literature when shippers shift to a new gateway, a new location, it takes time to come back, or they may never come back. So so there are definitely costs that we're measuring of disruptions there.
Thank you. So let's move into something that's not as complicated. USMCA CUSMA. Sorry, we've been talking a lot about that, but where can we find opportunities for Canada and the US to collaborate in transportation, border and regulatory systems to support the agricultural trade under that agreement? Any thoughts?
Well, I think from the beef cattle sector, I mean, we've talked about it. I mean, I brought it up heavily in my presentation, and certainly all the meetings that we've been having, Alberta beef producers and our national organizations like Canada Beef and Canadian Cattle Association in meetings with our U.S. counterparts is just understanding that efficiency of trade north-south versus east-west. We've built over the last number of years the infrastructure, is currently already in place in so many areas of it, and we look to strengthen that. I think it's just as we have these discussions, it's about creating awareness. I know even visiting with our U.S. counterparts, there was two people from the Cattle Association in North Dakota, and North Dakota, Canada, you think, well, we're relatively close in terms of proximity, but understanding of trade would certainly be top of mind. And these producers and representatives from their cattle organizations stared at us and didn't have an understanding of the intricacies of how our two sectors were connected. So I think building that communication and understanding, with our American counterparts and honestly with our Canadian ministers and things like that, to just try to understand that a lot of the infrastructure, at least in the cattle side, is in place today. Are there improvements we can make? Certainly, but we're already working for those efficiencies, and if we lose those, then we'll just decimate a huge portion of our economy.
Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? All right. Well, let's move on to PNWER specifically. Obviously, PNWER has the opportunity to do some advocating on all our behalf. So if you were to give advice to PNWER, what regional transportation priorities should PNWER be advocating for to collectively strengthen not only agricultural competitiveness, but support food security?
Well, I have one right off the top, the Columbia River Treaty. So we operate on the Columbia River. So if that treaty doesn't get ratified, so I'll just give you a quick history. It was ratified back in 1964, essentially with a 60-year flood control management portion of that treaty. That flood control management, you guys in Canada, you have a lot of reservoirs and dams that hold water back during the spring freshet. And then later, you'll let water go into the system so that we can, as operators, maintain that 14-foot draft that I mentioned earlier. If we don't have that water is a commodity no different than anything else. If we don't have that commodity and we don't have that agreement with Canada, we have been in negotiations for over 10 years, working on getting that flood control management portion of that treaty completed and over the line. Unfortunately, with every 4-year change up in the presidency, it stalls. And then there's geopolitical issues. Right now, the US pays Canada about $39 million to $40 million a year to just hold back water or let water into the system, where before that was just a phone call. There wasn't a payment. There was a payment of $64 million back in 1964 for 60 years of flood control management. Today, we have to pay nearly $40 million a year. And guess what? I have to go back to DC and dance on the table begging our Congress to appropriate that $40 million so that all my operators that are in the wheelhouse pushing those barges will do it safely. So PNWER, if there's anything I can do to provide more information, just having you maybe not at the table, but your voice amongst the two countries as they negotiate that would be helpful.
Great. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say a big thing that PNWER could do is harmonizing the regulations for cross-border, whether it's with the trucking and the permitting and the weights. That's one where it would make a significant difference. I think we talked about it in the other panel as well. When we can be on the same page, have the same sort of regulatory thing, it makes that movement easier. And I think that would be a really big one and would make a significant difference.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts? All right, well, let's move on to some other topics. we've talked about, it's been brought up throughout the presentation, but there's always disruptions, the unavoidable disruptions. So how do you respond to things like that? The weather events, rail challenges, the aforementioned labor disputes, congestion, border delays. What's been your strategy dealing with things like that?
Well, at Tidewater, we're incredibly resilient. So if the rail is congested or if there's an accident on the line, everything can go on barge. Everything that's on rail, everything that's on truck can go on barge. So we're that person that you call when something gets stuck on rail. As far as how do I put this? So barging, being that it is so resilient, it just needs to make sure that our infrastructure is supported. So each one of those locks and dams I had mentioned earlier, there's 4 on the Columbia River and 4 on the Snake. Those are owned by the U.S. government, and they're funded by the U.S. government, and they're maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers. Every year, for about 3 to 5 weeks, those locks close down for maintenance. No different than you would take your car in and get a tune-up. Those close down. What do we do as Tidewater and other river operators? We pre-plan with our customers. We make sure that all of that storage capacity at our terminals are taken. We put barges upriver so that they can fill them up if they need to. And so what we need to make sure is that those dams are taken care of, and that that the money is appropriated to make sure that they work appropriately and safely. So,
Great, thank you.
I believe our colleague on the screen alluded to it earlier when he talked about utilization of technology and moving things more digital. That will make a significant difference because, pardon me, it'll reduce. There's the human error factor. It'll also speed up the process. For those, if you could have digital pre-approvals at the border, especially when you're dealing with live animals. So investment on that piece, that actually will go a long way to speeding up and improving the process. So when you talk about some of those disruptions, maybe, just streamline.
Good.
I guess the only thing I'd add on the disruption side is, for other commodities like grains, and I certainly, don't undermine this as a comment, but we're dealing with a live animal, and unfortunately, in our situation, when we do see those disruptions, we're dealing with an animal welfare concern potentially. I know when the tariffs did come on here a while ago, on a Tuesday morning, fat cattle that were destined to go down for harvest in Utah, by Thursday of that week, all fat trucks had ceased to exit Canada. They had just stopped, and those cattle piled up, not literally, but they piled up in bunk space back at the feed yards, and they put on extra gain, and the health concerns that we see around that can become extremely difficult to handle and deal with. So, how do we handle the disruptions? Technology and different things are fantastic. Unfortunately, we're still dealing with this live animal, so it does start to work with our harvest facilities here in Canada to understand that maybe we're in the process of moving more box beef and compared to live cattle. We need to make sure that they have the labor force, that they have the infrastructure in place to house, handle, freeze, and then hopefully we can start to move those products. Because if we do see that stall or that trip in any one way, it's a huge concern going forward.
Great, thank you. And Mathieu, you got any comments?
Yeah, for sure. Transport Canada, there's about 4 things, we're looking in terms of disruptions. The first thing is we've developed a methodology to assess the economic impact of those disruptions. I think it's important to understand the impact, what's impacted and how, what are the consequences short and longer term. So it's something we've been looking into before disruption happened, during, but also after. There's a bit of an ex post analysis that's being done, after the disruption. What can we learn in terms of what was affected in terms of, such and such disruptions to really learn from it. The second thing is to convene stakeholders whenever there's a disruption, whether whether it's labor or climate-related disruptions. It's to bring those stakeholders together to basically share information and exchange, some of the latest to make sure everybody's on the same page. And it's been successful, in the past disruptions where convening stakeholders, shippers, but also transportation assets owner, exchanging that information, making those connections between the stakeholders. A third thing is we're looking to is more ad hoc, more in a sense that pursuing those ad hoc solutions. If you recall the atmospheric river in 2021, where trucks received expedited authority to follow U.S. routes, and go around, basically to avoid the floods and some of the road that were blocked there. So it's pursuing those small ones. A case on the East Coast, Port of Montreal, strike that lasted more than a week. There were efforts to prioritize the evacuation of some of the essential goods out of the port that were containerized. And maybe the last thing is the good coordination we have with the United States. You asked the question earlier, do we have good collaboration? I think from a transportation perspective, we have great collaboration with the U.S. Department of Transportation. And one thing that we've been doing over the past years is those tabletop exercise simulations. So we simulated disruptions at border crossing. Last time was at the Niagara Falls crossing, where there was a simulation of a huge snowstorm blocking the flows in and out of Canada. And all the stakeholders from each department, each administration are there to exchange information, not exchange information, but basically practice. Okay, who do we call? The road is blocked. I would call this person. So to enhance coordination, basically, in terms of disruption. So that's one of the work we've been pursuing with our U.S. colleagues there.
Great, thank you. All right, we're getting close to the end, so I just want to take a quick moment and give the panelists an opportunity to say maybe one quick thought as we depart. And just keep in mind, the faster you talk, the more chance we're first in line for lunch. So who'd like to jump in? Quick final thought.
Okay. Not so shy anymore, am I? You got me on a topic that clearly fires me up because it's so important. Transportation. So thank you all for coming to this panel and recognizing there's a lot to learn in it. And there's a lot we can do to improve it. There's a lot of good going on, for sure. We know that there are challenges, but if we put the investment in now into the infrastructure, that will make an instant difference. We've got to start putting some investment into the infrastructure that's already existing to improve it. I mean, again, for me, I look at it. There's the two main borders we have going to the Port of Vancouver. That's where we go, and then the Coot Sweetgrass border. Those are our two main borders that we do a lot of work in, and that's where it goes for Alberta. And so let's get some of that investment in there. I'm glad to see we're using real data to track things, because it's really important when you're making decisions. You should be using proper data so that's encouraging. And I still say, make it an essential service so that we don't have those disruptions. Now that is a Canadian thing, I know, and I'm harping just because I know there's a government guy up there listening. So humor me, everybody. But thank you all very much. And now I want to come see your thing because I'm actually quite excited about it. But I've so appreciated being on this panel with everybody else. So thank you for having me.
So I'm just going to point out kind of something that I don't know if everybody thinks about, but essentially between California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, you have an entire carbon green market that has happened when it comes to energy, and low carbon fuel standards that are happening in our states and then up in British Columbia. So what I'm thinking that could really be used, especially in the state of Washington and Oregon and Idaho, because eventually maybe you'll end up there as well, is to start investing in bringing those biofuels, those renewable diesels. Montana right now, the Montana renewable, that volume has kind of bypassed Oregon and Washington and headed down to California or up to British Columbia. We need more volume of that so that we can, as states, meet those carbon fuel standards and those goals that the state has. And at this rate, we're not going to get there. And I think I spoke to a couple gentlemen here earlier who were looking at potentially doing like biofuel, bringing that in, starting a production down in the east part of Washington or Oregon. We have land, we have electricity, we have water. If Canada will make sure that they give some to us, but you know, it's a great area and the market is there. I swear we have biofuels that come into our terminals and renewable diesel when they do show up, they're out the door that day. They come in by rail, out the door. They're out at those gas stations and being put into those trucks. And those combines. So just a little plug to start bringing some of that product and business into that area.
Yeah, just quickly, you know, Minister Sawyer mentioned it at the tail end of the last presentation I caught, and you know that she talked about the cattle industry as we're taking our turn in terms of profitability. You know, we understand that that's great for producers, but we also understand how that reflects back on the consumers. You know, beef is incredibly high priced in the stores, and I think the way that we can help adjust and keep beef prices down maybe isn't so much in increasing the mother cow inventory, but it's about the efficiencies working within our own systems, right? So if we can keep the PNWER region working in an effective, efficient way, that our plants that are harvesting these cattle can extract the maximum amount of dollars, it can help reflect back. And if we can get the stability within our region, it entices producers, young, old, whoever, I don't care, we'll welcome everybody, to expand and grow. And we're not talking massive expansion. We understand that, if 100 cow herds of 60 cows all added 2 or 3, that's a significant step forward in growing our cow herd. What does that do? It produces more beef that we can transport through the region. We become more efficient in terms of how we handle and how we harvest, and essentially, hopefully, we can become at a price point that's a little bit more palatable for the end consumer. So,
thank you. All right, so you got the last minute. Final word.
Thank you. So I'll be very brief. PNWER, important region. Agri-food critical supply chain. There are challenges that were mentioned, bottlenecks, capacity constraint, the labor is a challenge. There are opportunities going forward. You know, we discussed a bit of opportunities in Asia, but also opportunity in US, Canada to trade. What do we do about it? Well, there's four ingredient, I guess, to make the supply chain more efficient. Infrastructure, labor stability, digital investment, including visibility and the technology, but also coordination across the sector there. So thank you for having me.
All right, 10 seconds to spare. So let's give a quick hand to all our presenters. And
thank you, everyone. Thank you.